So, ropes, sticks, connections, combat. That's the topic. I know what you're thinking. Wait, am I in the right channel? Don't worry, you're in the right place. This is still the House of Discovery. And for this episode, we are temporarily shifting away from our focus from 360 video and VR to another powerful immersive medium, video games. You understand why we do this at the end of the video. They are somehow still connected. And yes, we are going to talk about that game, the one that has been all around all the internet, Death Stranding 2 on the beach. So sit tight. At this video, end of it, you get a clear idea of how it deeply relates to storytelling and why it is closely relevant to the VR and spatial video things that all we've been talking about. So by the time you see this video, I have played the full game, and I highly recommend you doing so. But if you haven't, be rest assured, don't worry, because this is not a plot review. We're not here for story spoilers. Instead, we are going to dissect what has always fascinated me deeply and what defines this channel, its interactive and storytelling components. So because with Death Stranding 2, or DS2 for short, Hideo Kojima, the director, presents us with more than just a game. I would say it's a world full of contradictions and philosophical questions. And if the first game was an optimistic call for connecting in a fractured world, the sequel, this time, immediately confronts us with a far more complex and dangerous, I would say, question that you have already seen on the title: should we have connected? So that question hung there for quite a long time, and is not only at the heart of the sequel's plot, but also directly echoes a fundamental challenge in the field of interactive narrative, which I am deep inside, that the narrative paradox. So that is, when the player's free will conflicts with the author's narrative intent, where does the story go? That raises another question, right? So today here, what I'm going to do is to use the Death Stranding series as our case study, and we will start with its social stand system, dive deep into the interactive narrative theories behind it, and finally look ahead to how this design philosophy will guide us towards the future of storytelling, especially thinking with XR. So to understand Death Stranding, you must understand its core, the social strand system, SSS for short. This is a form of asynchronous multiplayer. Simply put, that in a game you will never see another player in your own world, but you can see and use the traces leave behind. So you play the game, you know that. It could be just a bridge, or a ladder, a generator, or even a warning sign of the BTs. These items left by countless anonymous players in your game world form a unique emotional connection. You don't know who they are, but they have genuinely received help, they give help to you. Hideo Kojima calls this new genre of game one focus on connection rather than confrontation. We frequently see many other games. This influence can be subtle at some time. When enough players travel the same route, a clear emergent path will show up on the map and actually show on the terrain, created by this collective wisdom that will be etched into the terrain. Actually, you will see it. And this is just not for convenience only, it's a narrative itself. A story of struggle, exploration, the collective optimization, all ahead of you, silently written upon the land. And also another thing, the like system is also the ignition for this narrative engine. Has no economic value, of course, but yet is very powerful from its social capital. Every like you receive reinforce this altruistic behavior and contributes to an unseen benevolent community of players, and transform what could be a tedious delivery task into a meaningful act of participating in a collective narrative co-creation. You haven't actually realized that yet. Follow on, I will let you know understand why. So the genius idea The tip of the ice that behind this social strand system lies in its perfect implementation of the many core concepts that, as a researcher, understand from contemporary interactive narrative theory. So to understand this, you follow me, that we will first need to quickly review of what interactive storytelling actually is in the term of itself. So the most common form we are all familiar with for interactive narrative is the branching narrative. We'll see the different way. As you see in many RPGs, at a certain point, the author presents options A, B, and C, and D for you. Your choices, one of them determines which predetermined storyline you will follow. But in this model, your freedom is essentially about making choices within a closed structure that is fully controlled by the author. But a true interactive storytelling that all the theorists are pursuing today is far more ambitious than that. So in the idea model, the author is no longer a screen or script writer, but the creator of a story world full of possibilities. The system would have an AI-like director, we call them drama manager, which dynamically generates a unique story based on all your actions. Every move you make, every interaction, every moment you took in the game world is captured by another system called user model under drama manager and influences the story's direction. So you're part of it. So what role does this DS social strand system play in this? Any mapping there? I would say, in my view, it acts as a form of distributed collective drama manager rather than a central AI one. The story beats here are just not preset plot points, but the bridges and shelters, ladders created by all the players, scattered. The user model, in another way, doesn't analyze your single individual psychology in the game, but rather gains insight into the collective needs of the entire player community through big data collected in the game. For example, on the map, which cliff actually needs the ladder or a bridge the most. So this design clearly addresses the core challenge of interactive narrative, that is the MP or narrative paradox. It is how to grant a player a high degree of freedom while ensuring the story remains coherent and dramatic. So Death Stranding's answer to decentralize this is a way that to put a portion of the narrative control and hand it over to the player community. The author controls the macroscopic world rules and themes via the game engine, while players fill in the world's microscopic narrative details through the player co-creation. So the reason that the social strand system integrates so seamlessly into the game is that its adherence to another design philosophy in this realm called implicit involvement. So it stands in stark contrast to a more commonly used term, explicit involvement, of many traditional interactive narratives. So explicit means it frequently somehow interrupts you with dialogue boxes to make choices, like the ads you see on YouTube. Well, no one likes it. Explicit involvement frequently breaks your state of flow, that pulling you out of the immersive world when you play the game and then making you aware that you are making choices, you are playing the game, you're not inside the game. Implicit involvement, on the other hand, weaves narrative choices into every moment of the core gameplay rather than pulling you out of it. So let's get back to Death Stranding as an example again. The system just don't ask you something like, do you want to place a ladder over here to help others? It simply just observes what you do. You place a ladder, and while your initial motivation might be to solve your own problem, cross a gap, it objectively has a narrative significance or significant consequences behind it. You have just participated in the act of helping someone else. Maybe you don't even realize it. Your gameplay action becomes a narrative action itself. This is precisely what a scholar, once the guy called Ian Bogost, called the procedural rhetoric. The game makes a persuasive argument through its rules and processes rather than through its language explicitly. The entire gameplay loop of DS procedurally argues its core theme that the world is isolated, it's difficult, but through altruism and the collective action, the connections can be made, things can be rebuilt, the world will come into one, but it doesn't tell you that, it lets you do and feel it during the game. So When a system possesses a high degree of player agency and with a deep mechanism of implicit involvement, a fascinating phenomenon can occur, and we call it emergent narrative. So emergent or emergence here refers to the stories that are not pre-scripted by developers or authors but grow from the bottom up inside the story world, arising from a complex system with interactions and unintended actions of the players. They can be unique, unpredictable, and full of randomness and full of surprises. So what is the most highlighted emergent narrative thing inside Death Stranding? Well, I believe it's the collective construction effort of the entire player community itself. That's every one of us is involved. You can see the highway as an example. The highway spanning the continent, the UCA or the Australia. Inside the game is an epic tale, I would say, of this rebuilding civilization storytelling thing underneath it. It's co-authored by millions of players. I don't think a single player could complete all the highway by themselves unless you're extremely put into it, but nor can any one single player experience its entire construction by itself. But the quad is that the creation of itself is a silent narrative moment to the power of the collective players that written into the game. In our world, in academia, designing for emergent narrative faces two major challenges, that is the story recognition and the story support. How can a system identify interesting emergent moments coming out of the bottom up and then generally nudge them towards making a more complete story? Well, interestingly, in many games, this function is completely outsourced to the player community. Elden Ring is one example, that people don't find story within the game, but they share their game moments to online social media, and the people figure out what the story is. But here, Death Stranding do it halfway, I would say, because its like system somehow get half of the loop integrated back into the game itself. So the player doesn't have to get outside of game to go to some other online forums for discussion. It gets its idea of validation of the actions and the understanding of the story inside the game itself. So it's a kind of a smart way of doing it, pulling it half back into the game. So when you do something, you get a validation, your understanding of the game gets kind of solidated into your gameplay. So when we project everything we learned from Death Stranding into the future, especially into the realm of extended reality or XR, what do we get? That's the question we ask at the beginning, right? Well, we know that the core of XR technology is about presence, which I talked many times, the feeling of being truly, physically embodied in a virtual space. So in such a medium, and traditionally there will be intrusive UIs, explicit choices popping up, will severely break immersion. So in the implicit involvement we just talked about and the asynchronous collaboration demonstrated by the game Death Stranding are actually, we'll say, almost tailor-made for XR narrative. So imagine a shared XR world that everyone applies inside this social strand philosophy. The player's actions, your actions, the path you take, the way you walk, the information you discover, the information you share, the objects you create, if you destroy, would leave a persistent, helpful traces for others who come after to understand the world. We don't even need to crowd into the same game online server, the waiting in the line for real-time interaction, the bear with the lagging and that kind of stuff. Instead, we can just co-shape a persistent, evolving virtual world that is organically, is always there and is changing, but asynchronously. So ultimately, I would say, Death Stranding reveals a vital direction for the future of narrative, especially XR narrative. The role of the designer is shifting from that of the omniscient author to that of more like a world architect. Their task is no longer to tell or close the story, but to design a narrative machine, an environment rich with all kinds of possibilities and imbued with a clear theme. Within that machine, a community of players comes in and empowered to discover, to enact, to co-create their own collective, filling up the game world with all kinds of emergent narratives. So I think this is undoubtedly a democratization of traditional creative model. So I want to end the video by asking you all this question. Do you think this player co-creation model of narrative will become the mainstream in the future alongside with technology involvement? And if in such a world, where will the value of author lie in? So please think about that and leave your deep thoughts in the comments. I'd like to have a discussion. And if you enjoy this video and spark anything, be sure to like, share, and of course subscribe. I will see you in next one. Thank you.